Hi, I'm Lori from HIS Talk. Welcome and thanks for joining us for today's webinar entitled DHMSM 101, The Hopes, Politics, and Players of the DoD's $11 billion EHR project. As most of you know, after more than a year of preparation, the Department of Defense released its RFP for its new electronic health record procurement on August 25th. The single award indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract is expected to have a total lifetime cost of $11 billion through the year 2030. Their selection of a commercially available EHR will change the winning bidders, the health and welfare of service members all over the world, and possibly the entire healthcare IT industry. We at HIS Talk have been receiving occasional updates from the anonymous dim sum. Our readers have responded enthusiastically and wanted to hear more from him. We're pleased to be able to bring him to you today. Today's webinar will include an overview of the military health environment, the military's history of using contractors to develop its systems versus its new direction in buying an off-the-shelf system, and its population health management challenges in caring for nearly 10 million patients all over the world, some of them on the battlefield. Attendee phone lines have been muted to prevent background noise. You can use GoToWebinar's questions box in the console to submit your questions to our presenter at any time. The presenter will answer your questions during Q&A at the end. Today's webinar is being recorded, so you'll receive a link to the recording in a follow-up email. Now I'd like to introduce our presenter. Dim Sum understands the unique nuances of the U.S. government and has enough experience in healthcare IT that he spells HIMSS and HIPAA correctly. Furthermore, he's an unwavering patriot who has yet donned a uniform and is passionate about healthcare IT and the manner in which care is delivered to our military members, retirees, and their dependents. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Dim Sum.
Hello, this is Dim Sum. Mr. Histalk and Laurie, thank you very much for the opportunity of the forum to share some thoughts and information on this incredible program. The players involved, as well as the nuances of military medicine. This should not be lost on our commercial colleagues. I know the vast majority of folks that are actually out here today have been dealing with Histalk for over a decade, and those folks have commercial background. So please forgive me, some of my brethren within the federal ranks, that we're going to be actually covering more things from that perspective, explaining things in the commercial realm versus going into aspects of detail within the Dim Sum project itself. Today's talk is designed to be both informative and entertaining. There we go. I've got to stop drinking while I'm actually speaking. Essentially, when I started talking to Mr. Histalk about Dim Sum, we discovered in short order that there are more questions than answers. And at the same time, we believe that I could cover a lot of things we do know. And in this format, I can express some very specific key points that should help people understand what Dim Sum is. This session is mostly a Dim Sum 101, if you will. This is not mundane stuff, folks. This is an amalgam of the U.S. healthcare IT system. The military population is a perfect slide of Americana. It's who we are. The members of the military, their dependents and respected veterans and their dependents possess the same medical issues that the rest of America has. Therefore, hypertension, cancer, and diabetes is not something strange and odd in this specific environment. If you remove the battlefield medicine component for a moment, replace it with a more sedate emergency service, a more passive, relaxing alternative to battlefield medicine, and then you'll see the military is actually us, and we are the military. That is our customer. Given the time restraints, I believe we can cover the program, the current environment, as well as the players involved. So off we go. Hold on tight, and I do apologize for this distortion in my voice, but if I was not able to disguise my voice, one might realize that I'm a common bloke. That would certainly harm my credibility, or perhaps surprise you as to what one person can do that possesses the same common interest that each and every one of you participating in this call have. And that is, we actually like to solve problems. We enjoy using our minds. That's the true business we're in. Welcome to Dim Sum. Now, for you commercial-minded folks, here's a quick analogy of a federal IT procurement process. Oversimplified perhaps, but it gives our commercial friends a founding understanding. Now imagine you are one of the largest, most respected federal government agencies. The next acquisition you're going to make for your powerful agency has a great deal of ramifications upon your agency receiving more tax dollars to invest and improve your operations. This is the mother of all procurements, as politicians have even had hearings about the need to improve this agency's bottom line. This is a federal mandate of government procurement. Each and every step along the process will be auditable and compliant to the extent anything can be compliant. And you follow orders without questions of reason why, because you are the contract officer. This shall be a painful exploration. You shall define what is needed. This shall be in budget. This shall be delivered on time, in budget, but only by those that qualify truly to bid. They have met the strict guidelines outlined by your agency. These firms must possess a vehicle to bid. In other words, they have to have some type of license to be able to bid in this deal. There are a huge amount of prerequisites that each firm offering services to this agency must meet. In this situation, we have to have a specific hair color, eye color, and a certain amount of employees that have a noticeable and or documented speech impediment. Your actions as the KO managing this procurement will be examined under the microscope, complete with political drama, media attention, and criticism that always accompanies any federal bid. Federal agencies tend to hide what they need, pontificate upon the great value of what that need is, and will justify it even when it's not vogue anywhere but within your own agency. Then in one quick swoosh, you generate a rock-solid request for proposal. Your agency has chosen you, the KO, to build a team so they can review the proposals from these firms to acquire the cheapest, technically acceptable, belligerent chia pet. I say chi-chi every time, I don't know why. Belligerent chia pet. The acquisition team finds what a belligerent chia pet is. They manage to convince your agency that the price of a belligerent chia pet should not exceed X. Step 1, you author a clear, concise, and easy-to-understand requirements document to send to these bidding qualified companies. As the KO, the contract officer, you provide just enough ambiguity so nobody can state you do not know what a chia pet is. And you certainly add a vast amount of details on the specific color of the clay that makes up the body of this chia pet. After the initial RFP, you receive 387 questions. All of these people are asking questions about the chia pets. But what is the one question they do not ask? Why is your agency pursuing a procurement to acquire a chia pet? The agency decides that at a minimum, 30% of the work should be done by small businesses. This set-aside is designed for firms that cannot spell chia, but have indeed owned a pet sometime in their lives. Companies vying for this are very excited. They start cursory reviews of commercial magazine called Chia Monthly, and even with their best subject matter experts, they cannot find one partner firm that understands that chia pets are truly organic. This is a problem, a technical challenge, and might require help from another Beltway firm. Beltway firms can solve anything. Just ask them. If that is not proof, each and every small business around the Beltway on the website basically says, we do anything, just ask and we'll say yes. Staff augmentation companies express their vast concern that the Chia Pet program could not possibly be done with less than 100 people, maybe up to 200 if you want a call center. They are shocked that the KO did not know the vast number of resources required to assemble the Chia Pet. Primes are so excited. They have the right vehicle to bid and immediately start trying to shape this belligerent chia pet program with the agency. They want the RFP to be more quantifiable. They want to ensure that they can price and solution the ultimate belligerent chia pet. Most Beltway companies are thinking, which company in the Beltway actually invented the chia pet anyway? Rumors on the street say the total contract value exceeds $20 billion US. That's real money, folks. Imagine how much more money the agency will have to spend with cost overruns. We shall see. Week 5 of the 5-year program will determine if the cost will be $20 billion or $30 billion. Immediately, prime service integration firms that have never designed, built, or serviced a full line of belligerent chia pets are searching for the right partners to actually execute on the program. One late night at Mexican-themed cafe in Silver Spring, Maryland, 2 power brokers from the prime company drink cerveza and lament that even though they're a firm that has decided to prime this unique opportunity, that they're both a bit perplexed as to how to solution it. How do you price it? And how can we explain the mystique that is the chia pet? Therefore, they spend a great deal of personal and professional time sending emails and having conference calls trying to establish what firm in the Beltway can actually make a chia pet, what company in the Beltway can distribute a chia pet, and what law firms in the Beltway can provide licenses for the chia pet. Where are these firms, if not in the Beltway? Quiet descends upon the conversation. 2 more surveys, please. 2 dour men wearing nice ties and semi-wrinkled shirts look at each other and say in unison, that is why we have a capture manager. The capture manager retired from the U.S. Merchant Marines in 1995. He's an upstanding member of the VFW in Culpeper, Virginia, and has a variety of friends that own chia pets. Therefore, along with his capture responsibilities, he will lead the team and will manage all aspects of the teaming relationship for program Chia Pet, as long, of course, as the partners are located in and about the Beltway. Meantime, the contract offer is trying to ensure the RFPs are sent out on time. The KO works tirelessly with a focus on sensitivity to make sure the RFP will not offend anyone, will not hurt anyone's feelings, and most importantly, will be written so well to avoid any form of post-award protest. The KO's #1 mission is to avoid protests. So this RFP was written so well, not one prime could say, it's not fair. Why not my Chia Pet? We have a better than Chia Pet. Give us another chance, please. Their pet is not angry enough. How can you have a belligerent Chia Pet without anger? Well, that is what dim sum is, folks. A politicized process complete with a Chia Pet. Now, let's segue into a basic explanation of what dim sum is. Dim sum is one of many acronyms that will be covered in today's session, certainly. Dim sum stands for DoD's Healthcare Management System Modernization Program. This program has evolved in earnest for really more than 3 years. The key elements for this program to be replaced is the Composite Health Care System, CHCS. This solution was built and designed by SAIC, now Leidos. The Armed Forces Longitudinal Technology Application, ALTA, was built and designed by the folks from Northrop Grumman. Accenture was later brought on board to manage the critical care arena, as well as acute documentation. This solution was built and designed by CliniComp. CHCS and Accenture are acute-focused solutions. ALTA is the ambulatory care solution. There's an ALTA-T theater program, ALTA-M mobile, and elements of CHCS2 that offers some theater medicine modules. I'd like to get more into that conversation another time, but today let's not focus as much on theater as what I really would like to. But the neat thing about theater is that it's actually an austere environment. Great word, austere, isn't it? This is a word that's defined using words like severe, harsh, steely, flinty, grim, cold, frosty, unemotional, and most appropriately unfriendly. So that's definitely a different type of medicine to be practiced, and we'll discuss that hopefully at another opportunity at another webinar. Therefore, the key areas of care supported by the systems mentioned above support the acute, the critical care, ambulatory, and theater medicine. The environment customer, if you will, in the U.S. military is active duty, reserve, National Guard members. Their dependents, retirees, and in some cases regional veterans are also covered. The military health system supports upwards of 9.7 million Americans. The dim sum procurement process has certainly indicated that the primary mission of the course is really aimed at the 1.4 million active members of our armed forces. The projected total contract value over the first 10 years of operations will be more than $11 billion. I've heard in some instances, as you have, that it could top $15 billion. This number is not surprising knowing the fiduciary budget challenges we have in the federal IT space. The primary vendors, once they represent and lead these teams, they're called primes. These service integrators will actually manage all facets of program management and will deploy teams of specialists that meet the federal government requirements for transparency and fiduciary responsibility. That's that auditable status with regards to their financials. And have some elements, if not all the regulatory and compliance requirements expressed throughout the dim sum RFP process. Here are some fun statistics for the DoD military health environment. This will at least give you some size and structure to it. There are 55 acute hospitals, also known as military treatment facilities. Most average 53 bed in size. Some are as complex as University Health Consortium site hospital with a lot of clinical research that can be extended certainly to handle more beds if and when needed. And some actually have quite horrible occupancy rates, but they're available and provide support for our military members, their spouses, and veterans. There are 352 ambulatory and specialty clinics. This includes special operations medical groups that work with special force personnel and their unique ailments. And there are over 321 ships. This would include the Mercy and the USS Comfort, 2 ships. The sole purpose of design was for theater medicine support, first responder, disaster response, as well as humanitarian missions. Most of the ships, after a walk-in style clinic and so on, offer surgical suites if and when required. Think of the Challenger ships at times are so much focused more upon communications. how their data will need to be shared for continuity of care purposes, as well as updates to the deployment and readiness systems for operational health management. The DoD system also has over 70,000 clinicians. That's significant. The Defense Health System employs upwards of 137,000 personnel. Their current budget is at or about $50 billion US. I'm not going to discuss the 282 dental clinics. I just had a crown replaced, and I'm in no mood to talk dental care. Although it's essential for readiness as well as a healthy force, my teeth are still in a bit of pain. In addition, let's talk about a little bit about the portable medical units within the theater medicine. This is unique and different because in the commercial market space, we don't have anything like it. Resuscitative care. Think of this really as your Trauma One center that's portable. Receives battlefield casualties from battalion aid stations located in the combat zone. Casualties that cannot be adequately treated or stabilized in that specific environment are then transported or evacuated to a hospital or military hospital. Hospital ships are also deemed as portable, as well as they should be, part of the portable medical units, as well as a combat support hospital, a CSH, pronounced CASH, formerly known as Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. We've all watched MASH. That's what a MASH unit is. And then before that, they're actually called portable surgical hospitals. These units are military-owned, demountable containers known as mill vans. Okay, and essentially, they're climate-controlled. They have pharmacy, laboratory, radiology, and dental capabilities. So quite impressive. The battalion aid station is basically where the 68 Whiskey combat medics from the U.S. Army, as well as the corpsmen from Navy/Marine Corps, are out there. And on occasion, we actually see a flight medicine participant. Forward surgical teams are small mobile surgical units that are utilized in a variety of ways and can be attached to a forward support medical company. This essentially is saying it's a small medical team dealing with surgery downrange, or on the edge and cusp of downrange, which is a belligerent zone. Shipping container clinics. This is a clinic in a can. The U.S. military actually deployed in 2013, folks, a solar-powered unit, okay, that fully operational miniature clinic, if you will, for the folks in Haiti. Rather impressive. So, all in all, think of this as a global integrated delivery network. All right, the statistics are not nearly as impressive as the system as a whole. This will be the world's largest health information exchange. Continuity of care is critical, as we all know, especially in and out of theater medicine, but especially along the transition where a person goes from active duty into the status of being a civilian. That's sliding into the VA route. There have been a lot of discussions, especially politically, about that specific connectivity that should occur in transitioning patients over, and honestly, it just has not been resolved. They've not been very friendly to either case because they actually have not had the right technology foundation to share this information. Innovations in commercial medicine have been enabled by military research and innovations. If you don't believe this, you're absolutely crazy. Sadly, the innovations stem from the catalyst of war. Therefore, military medicine has played an important role as a leader in medical research. A perfect example is the way in which the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have advanced prosthetic care and innovation, especially in things like skin, growth of skin. Trauma care has shown a significant increase of survivability of injuries that in the not-so-recent past would have been deemed as expectant and would end the life of an American soldier, airman, sailor, or Marine. Military influence has also impacted the field of reconstructive and plastic surgery. Now, is there no doubt in this? Think about the charting and assessments of vital signs intake output that could be taken, as well as order management, as well as the entire auditable account experience, if you will, and how that can be put into research. Perhaps someday soon we can have an informative and impressive session on the value and fundamental debt owed by modern medicine, our society in general, to research done within the military ranks, and the innovations that have been made downrange, working with casualties, improving the survivability rate of American combatants. You know, just think of the value that was invented and refined via military use. The U.S. military during the Civil War were the first Americans that deployed Napoleon-style ambulance methods to evacuate patients. All right? World War I, where triage approaches impacted the survivability of troops. World War II, combat medics were better equipped with blood and penicillin-lowering infection rates than ever before in the history of man. In World War II, veterans came home and actually became the backbone of modern emergency medicine in the commercial world. And you cannot deny that disruptive technologies from the Korean War and the Vietnam War, using helicopters to actually evacuate patients, created air evacuation protocols that are still used today. Vietnam saw the advent of wound adhesives. This technology wasn't even FDA approved until 1998. Talk to any medic, the importance of it, it's paramount. Modern military combat medicine has further defined and validated tactical combat casualty care. That's the term the military uses. It's basically a treatment guideline for the use of tourniquets, hemostatic agents, needle chest decompression, and hypertensive resuscitation. Wounded warriors in Iraq and Afghanistan, folks, had a 95% chance of surviving the battlefield injuries. That's the highest survival rate in the history of warfare. That's significant. This is why this is so very, very important. It's not just the foundation, folks. It's basically about how we approach them as a client. This certainly is not a lecture, as much as an insight on the DHMSM program. It's customer, as well as the flinty thoughts I have on the history of the vendors offering an EHR solution and the firm appointed as the guide-ons to execute on a successful implementation and adoption, allowing the military clinicians to care for a priceless commodity, which, namely, the men and the women that defend our freedoms. Now, back to the sobering challenge before us. Regulatory vetting of personnel and compliance is a big deal in the federal IT space. Now, with the DoD leading this effort, we should not be surprised how many levels of compliance that primes, their partners, and software vendors will have to be introduced. In some instances, requirements as simplistic in the Beltway as 508 ADA, that's the American with Disabilities Act, would have historically curtailed some commercial vendors from even being involved with this. However, as of late, the primes have dedicated their personnel and talent in sort of a federalizing plan, the solutions, or at least providing a degree of comfort for EHR vendors that they want to endeavor this opportunity, right? So 508 ADA requires that all applications are accessible to American workers with disabilities. This is easier said than done, but mostly easier said. It costs money. It takes time, and it does require, in certain aspects, coding and integration. The compliance issues on security go far and beyond standard HIPAA. It starts and ends with where the data is stored, how the data is transmitted, as well as the manner in which the data is shared. Cybersecurity scans ameliorate the risk of an unwarranted data abstraction. The DoD will work with primes knowing that commercial products have a ways to go to meet federal IT standards. If this was not accurate, then commercial vendors would have already been here then, wouldn't they? And mistakes would not have been made contracting HIT amateurs to manage and recreate from scratch a solution that had never been purchased in the first place. This would have never been purchased by a commercial hospital. The U.S. has over 5,700 hospitals, and less than 4% of them are primed, prepped, and focused on military health. This does not in any way weaken the value. It's saying look at it by a certain size perspective, and also by the population. You also see how many have moved towards ambulatory as well as sharing civilian medical institutions. The price for DHMSM may pretty much have been identified. Leidos, formerly SAIC, is a prime. Price, Waterhouse-Coopers is a prime. IBM, InterSystems, and CSC. Each of these vendors hopefully have found some viable partners to really help in these categories. Strategy, the implementation, the training. Now, strategy is really about the transition, parallel, legacy to the to-be, and real-time synchronization. How exactly do you do that? Keep those things up and live at the same time. People have gone away from the Big Bang theory and idea and concept, but certainly going off and having an evolution, if you will, of lives makes sense. Migration, conversion of the legacy data, integration, interoperability, medical device connectivity, enterprise communications, and for something that's brand new to us in the commercial side, readiness and deployment. Think of occupational health on steroids. That's what it is essentially. It's going in and making sure that there's physicals on all the folks. What is the physical status of our folks? Before I send them overseas, before I ship them to a specific location, before I allow them to go to a specific new job role that requires a better audio acumen or visual acumen and so on, we're going to go and check and confirm and validate that. That operational deployment system is a significant component in integration and interoperability. Huge challenges because it's ancient, it's proprietary. I think the U.S. Army is actually written in COBOL, for God's sakes. That's cutting-edge technology in some places here and about the Beltway. The standardizations of medical terminology are important. Synchronization of data, both legacy and to-be environments, will allow essentially you to consolidate data and then do what you have to do, and that is provide data liquidity for analytics. Project management support, compliance, security access, vetting of personnel, patient management, theater medicine. These are very high level, but if we actually had discussions about each individual one, there has to be a plan, there has to be a strategy for this, or they're certainly going to fail when it comes to the DoD selecting them as the award. High-level explanation of the current military HIT environment. What is it like? Well, it's a hodgepodge of disparate systems using and leveraging archaic communication and non-standard and or ancient integration protocols for point-to-point interfaces. There was never a common core foundation for technology. Therefore, imagine building a home with a porous foundation or a cracked one or lack thereof. Commercial hospital information systems had similar mentalities in the 1980s, when a vast majority of integrations were point-to-point. However, those vendors did evolve, didn't they? The market demanded it and asked all hospital information system vendors, that's serving the acute environment certainly, to integrate more dynamically with radiology, laboratory, pharmacy, and later on cardiovascular. But in those early days of best of breed, made a strong statement opposed to saying I'm monolithic. HIS, Hospital Information System, that serve the acute care environments like SMS, then later on Siemens, and now, of course, now Cerner, HBOC, now McKesson, and even systems that were designed, by the Philistines back in the day, like Meditech, understood that to compete, you had to integrate to ancillary solutions. There was no choice, there was no option. If a radiologist, laboratory, pathologist, and the like, or a cardiovascular surgeon said, I need this, you're saying, absolutely, let's make it work. It was really not until Epic came along that the seamless bridge was created using an older, stable foundation between acute and ambulatory, that continuity of care could actually be discussed with a straight face. So many of the military health IT pieces were never designed to share and or collaborate clinical information. That's not shocking because they're going to point fingers at each other. I'll explain that later here. But in some cases, the solutions in place actually permitted clinicians in key environments to code their own functionality. Talk about version control. Could you imagine that? Basically saying, let's give a clinician the ability to go in and code himself. All right? There's plenty of blame to share as well as perpetrators. Who's to fault? Some can say, as a politician would, that we designed the solution as specified. I'm not quite sure I buy that. As a primary commercial EHR vendors competing for the DHMSM award, be it Allscripts, Cerner, Epic, given to you, by the way, in alphabetical order, would certainly work at length with a customer and would provide a software development lifecycle-based roadmap, contingent on workflow, standards-based integrations. And yes, that even includes you, Epic, because I know you're willing to do it. You just have to have the impetus. And would also require leveraging the experience the commercial vendors had with other like-size hospitals. That's significant. And medical services to offer a palatable solution and workflow that could be adopted. Could be documented, actually, and could also be conceivably sustainable. We must remember that the initial contractors signed to create, CHCS and Alta, had no experience and or client base. So imagine that as your vendor of choice. Where could they begin in earnest to establish an acute and ambulatory solution that would ever be sustainable, that could actually be adopted? And what clinician would do that? One cannot design an aircraft with a pilot standing there saying, no, doesn't look right. What's that shiny thing right there? Oh, that looks a bit strange. That could add some drag, couldn't it? No, you bring them in at the appropriate time. Clients in the commercial HIT world really have the Missouri mantra. That is, show me. This is where standard, competitive, and experienced HIT developers shine. I mentioned in one of my early blogs that a standard beltway development company could not create, design, and develop a viable solution. Not because they do not have passion or they don't have smart engineers. They simply do not have the market experience or years of market exposure. This market exposure is actually the foundation of where we learn what works and what doesn't work and then starts going a different direction. And sadly, in the military environment, in IT, there's not change of direction. We call it inertia. Once again, I'll cover that in a moment. This experience is paramount to any quantifiable degree of success. Someone within the DoD made the valid statement that hospitals across America are using these commercial systems. Thank God. Risk mitigation is not a foreign concept to these companies, and not unlike the federal HIT environment, have had to develop an EHR to meet local, state, and national requirements for financial reimbursement and for quality measurements in a wide variety of disciplines. Registries that are actually constructed within the features and functions, not as an outlier, not as a separate islet of information that lacks connectivity and access, but integrated registries. This is the only way, by the way, that population health and chronic disease will ever be managed via HIT. I think we all agree with that. Each medical specialty has their own process, their own workflow, and by God, ontology, common medical terminology, common protocols, order sets, and even the way in which results are displayed affect adoption. Any solution with a pound of pork has closed-loop medication in it. Leapfrog is real, as is the reaction the industry had when they read and understood the implications of the Quality Chasm Report. If you don't know what the Quality Chasm Report is, folks, go out and search for it. There shouldn't be anyone on this phone call that doesn't know what that is. All right? That report shared the high number of mistakes being made in hospitals across America. It was a wake-up call for us all. These battles are being managed. They're difficult, but they're not impossible. Now look, the military has stakeholders, most assuredly they do, but they're transient, and in many ways do not have a say in the solution they're given, and cannot impact in an effective way modifications to code, when in reality, commercial vendors have designed their solution to avoid code changes altogether. Essentially, commercial EHR vendors have instead made a purposeful and painful transition to a configurable system. These configurations and the ease of use to configure are what makes or breaks these solutions. That's the differentiation. You know, I recall a site in Canada that once stated with all sincerity and a lovely smile that the hospital information system that they were deploying was great. We've got 15 engineers here, full-time, working with our surgeons. I've got another 5 developers right in the back room focused on our needs. To me, that was basically like saying that I love my car because I have 5 mechanics living in my basement. The question is that smart, and is that sustainable? That's what this is all about, by the way. We can all agree that a specification is both implied and specific, but to what extent? Who is to blame for the ACA legislation rollout of health insurance exchanges? Is it the technology used? Is it the way they deployed it, they implemented it, the training? Or was it the engineers and developers of specified functional requirements? Does a lack of standards increase or decrease sustainability? What about adoption? If the system is tested and integrated, tests show problems, one would expect that a different approach is warranted. There's no lack of intelligence beyond the Beltway, folks, and there's certainly plenty within the Beltway. But one must admit that experience, i.e. wisdom, is beneficial when you consume the specifications and truly understand what it takes to meet the stated requirements, all the while focused on what underlying foundation of technology must be in place to manage interoperability and the big words, portability, scalability, and adoption. Versioning and synchronization issues alone would have required a complete recall in the commercial HIT market. With large, complex federal IT programs, sadly they become heavy political football players with vast waistlines. And as they run down the hill of expectations, they cannot change direction. If they did, injuries would certainly ensue. This inertia is the foe of the prime and the teams they've selected for this adventure. Now, let's talk a little bit, very quickly, by the way, on commercial and military medicine IT areas of differentiation. It took a long time, looking at the RFPs that have been provided by the DoD, for us to truly understand that some things are implied more than specified, and decided to make a list of items that differentiate the 2 medical disciplines. Don't get me wrong, I love the documents provided. It would have been impressive if they managed to put in a few memorable lines here or there, maybe you quote somebody great, or maybe even something was rhyming. That would be lovely. I think it would be nice. But alas, they did not express that. What they did express is what they want, or what they think they want. Here is my list of items the primes and their teams need to try to differentiate themselves on. Population health management, most assuredly. The manner in which you communicate with occupational health, that's the deployment readiness system. How do you manage multimedia? Folks, the 3M multi-system, what is it, HAMES, that's not cutting it. Everyone knows that. And the truth is, this is not a VNA. This is not a vendor-neutral archive either. Interactive real-time enterprise clinical data repository is absolutely essential. PTSD protocols, specifically looking at the workflow. The workflow notification to appropriate brass within the command is unique and different, and nobody has that in the civilian sector. Medical research, to what extent we actually communicate with medical research. Forms management certainly is a challenge. Patient registries, there are so very many, from cancer, KIA statistics, PTSD, pathogens, epidemiology, biosurveillance, trauma brain injury, audio loss, radiation exposure. These are unique things that are actually islands of information. Pain management is a significant challenge because of the folks coming back from war zones. Patient engagement, actively engaging patients with a potent PHR that's actually multimedia. Blood product administration, blood component therapy. I cannot tell you enough how important it is that that is a piece within your solution. remote monitoring, that's not just EICU and telehealth, but also telemonitoring. Material management, inventory control, the military is fantastic at this. However, it's nice to be able to integrate with it. Their prosthetic management, advanced orthopedics is incredible. The research they've done on contralateral limb use is quite impressive. Ship-to-shore collaboration, what do you do in low-comm environments, etc. Burn management, implant tissues. Within theater medicine, what are we doing to actually link together all aspects of evacuation conduits, the inter and intra-theater, like that for Aerovacs, Casevacs, Tacovacs, detainee health, etc. Also, the largest genomic and proteomic medicine database in the United States is actually folks from the military. So that's impressive. So feeds to the CDC, NIH, etc. Continuity of care is certainly important. This is not unique and different. You know, perhaps we should actually take a look overseas at how Europe has developed a consortium for an EHR with clinical research capabilities. It's called EHR 4CR. This project's one of the largest public-private relationships providing adaptable, reusable, and scalable solutions for reusing data from electronic health record systems for research. That would be fantastic. Now, let's do the fun part. This is my favorite part, and this is why I'm actually here, is because I threw out some ideas early on. If I offended anyone, by all means, I apologize. If I made you laugh, then thank you. But let's talk about each of the players now. Let's break this out. Essentially, CSC is teaming up with HP and offering Allscripts as their electronic health record. Now let's talk about the good, bad, and ugly of that. CSC acquired First Consulting Group. So they certainly have commercial HIT chops. That's a good sign. However, choosing Allscripts as their EHR has a real challenge with regards to acute and ambulatory interoperability, or the perception of interoperability. I know the DoD says we want best of suite, best of breed, but they don't mean they want integration. They want interoperability. And I think a lot of that has to do more with the platform. And the platforms are different. In the acute and ambulatory, it's more challenging. Okay, the acute environment, Eclipsis, was essentially designed with very old code, and it hasn't been improved. It was acquired in 2010, and still the client base for Allscripts / Eclipsis have not seen changes. That would be nice to improve. But I do not believe this team is one of the top DHMSM teams. CSC leads the way on military spouse employment. I know this, I read the article, so it must be true. That's great and wonderful for military spouses. I just do not think that it's a good reason to award DHMSM to CSC. But we shall see, certainly. I am not a foreseer of futures. CSC does have a decent track record of work for DoD. HP is a strong player in the DoD space. Their ability to really answer the business continuity, high availability, disaster recovery, data redundancy will be outstanding. That will resonate with the DoD. There's no doubt in my mind there. This team lacks the deeper understanding, however, of the current military HIT environment and the integration, migration, and conversion required for transition and parallel services. HP and CSC both agree clouds are important. Ask any farmer, they too will agree. Clouds are important, and most everyone is going to offer a cloud in some capacity, but there will also have to be tethered clouds as well as hybrids of even some beastly client servers. Sorry to disappoint some folks, but even with SOA, this is going to happen in certain locations, especially overseas and with portable units. IBM is teaming up with CACI and offering Epic as their EHR. The good, bad, and ugly. IBM is big. IBM is huge. CACI is big, certainly in the Beltway. What can one say about IBM? Well, they have incredible capabilities. They're innovators and have a long history in IT. And they introduced America to the Blue Man Group. That is so very cool. I don't know if you've ever attended that show. Lots of rhythm. Good, good. So anyway, one could assert that knowing Epic as well as the unique way that they deploy bona fide implementation teams using a very regimented methodology and so on, that they would indeed be the team to beat initially, especially in 2010 when people actually were thinking they might have actually been a sole source opportunity. So it's interesting. They've always been sort of an odds-on favorite. You know, and on top of it, for all of us commercial folks, what category have they not scored outstanding on in class report? Over the past 5 years, just pick one. Okay, the only class report I have heard that Epic was not in the top 5, all right, was basically top EHR vendors not based out of Wisconsin. Out of that, they're pretty solid. And sadly, even with that ridiculous class EHR vendor report, Epic came in 6th. So Epic's chosen technology is certainly becoming a bit long in the tooth. But teaming with IBM means they can leverage that relationship to port their application on top of a serviceable and viable SOA. CACI has some CMS experience. I know, that doesn't excite me either. Okay, CACI does have, however, some talent that came from one of the first quote-unquote beta sites that will occur out there in Seattle, Washington area. I think an ex-CMIO, CEO, CIO, some C-level thing. And but basically, the CACI's code has been less than attractive anywhere beyond the Beltway. The negative expressed by many after a pint is usually about Epic's way or the highway. You know, they lack flexibility. They do not play well with others. Don't get me wrong, the DoD will appreciate the structure and predictability of Epic's implementation methodology, but can the same execution occur with service integrator partners? I think you only have to look as far as the U.S. Coast Guard implementation to look at that. So that's a thought. Epic cannot use IBM as a pass-through. All right, so anyone that thinks that's happening is not. All right, Judith is a wonderfully intelligent, brilliant lady, but she cannot go off and look at IBM and have them say, look the other way, I'll do this for you. So they're going to work together. And certainly the number of people that are permitted to touch the golden egg that is Epic must be vetted and will have to lower their rate expectations. Commercial HIT looks at the quality of personnel and the degree of seasoned experience and is willing to pay for that talent. Primes in the Beltway, including IBM, care a great deal about the rates that will be charged by the service integrators that they must team to make up the 30% of small businesses. This will be a challenge. By the way, this is a challenge for anybody that's going to actually be competing for DHMSM, is how do you integrate in 30% small business? Integration is certainly a problem we've all discussed for Epic. In spite of their newly revealed product called Open, what a grand name. Open was revealed at the Newseum event, which, by the way, was very cool, and they had free drinks, so that's good. In a concerted effort to dissuade any naysayers that Epic will not play well with others, they created Open. So now Epic has publicly stated that sharing data is what they do best, not unlike Tiggers that bounce, bounce, bounce. The real quest will be how Epic manages the transition and parallel intercommunications with existing legacy proprietary systems, as well as the Enigma theater solution that nobody, I will name in this list, has in their COTS portfolio today. You know, I know of only one product that could make a play as a foundation technology for theater. But sadly, only one company has approached them, and that prime decided not to pursue DHMSM. It's so sad. Perhaps one of the top companies will pursue them. If they really do their homework, I think they'll find them. They're quite fascinating. Nice people, too. This is indeed an elite team. IBM is an elite team. Yes, Watson's pretty impressive, even though they keep rebranding it. You know, I don't know. Maybe later they'll go, whoa, whoa, Watson. I'm not sure what they're going to do. But I can say that there's a concern from some perspective that Epic has too many things on their plates. But then again, they've always done that, and they've always done well. You know, but I can say this, that Epic has wanted the world. You know, and if they're awarded DHMSM, they'll have the revenue to pursue the coveted markets of Estonia, Madagascar, and Suriname without batting an eye. So, pretty impressive team. Now, let's look at the next team, Leidos. Leidos is teaming up with Accenture and offering Cerner as their EHR. Good, bad, and ugly. It's pretty easy. Leidos split from SAIC. All right, SAIC was the one that created CHCS, the original acute care hospital information system. The question remains, are they the same old SAIC, or are they the kaleidoscope of innovation and ingenuity? Great logo, guys. I'm sure you spent a minute on that. Purple, it looks like a little paper airplane. That's very nice. Leidos lacks innovation. They have. Okay, you've had the program for X amount of time, and there's not a lot of impressive things that have occurred as an evolutionary thing. But you have a tremendous amount of motivation. You're the incumbent, after all. And if you look at win percentages for the incumbents, this team is daunting just for that fact. You know, this does make the axiom that the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. Predictability is a big deal in this market space, as well as reputation. And even if people complain about it, there's constancy that actually makes people feel comfortable. Leidos has a challenge, and yet here they brought on Accenture. Accenture has done incredible work with complex environments, especially in Singapore, for example. They've made huge strides in their commercial HIT market, and they've expressed and delivered in environments where many have failed. All you have to do is see CGI replacement and resolution of a functional HIX. That was impressive, folks. Accenture's very conservative. Look at their ties, for God's sakes. And the DoD respects that. They're not flashy, but they have a treasure trove of healthcare talent. I really did not understand why Accenture did not prime. But that has led me to believe that both teams came to one single conclusion after reading the RFPs, and that's that this is a risk mitigation play. This is a comfort play for the DoD, and this is a straight-up defense procurement. Politically, one could assert that Leidos might take this new opportunity and reenact the same silly decisions made with the CHCS, while others can say, in fact, I contend myself, that I think there's a lessons learned. If not, then they wouldn't have brought in Accenture, right? So it really does establish Leidos as more than a viable option. Are they willing to leverage the acquisitions they've made, though, with Vitalize and Max ITs to be an advantage? And will Leidos actually listen to the small, independent entity within their own ranks? I hope they do, because these folks are pretty bright. Accenture was a brilliant move. And when they had a choice between Epic and Cerner, they chose or were only given one viable option. I'm not quite sure what exactly happened there, but the option became Cerner. Cerner is a mover and a shaker. How do I know that? Just ask them. They'll tell you. It's true. Cerner acquired Siemens, a complacent vendor that has multiple platforms and was once a potent force in HIT when they were called shared medical systems. Cerner's not only a strong number 2 player, but their clinical applications have come a long way. And with this acquisition, they're sliding right in line with Epic to be tied to one. Even implementing the solution has become more routine. If you look at the early days with MD Anderson as an example of how new technology, what that can do to a legacy mindset, it's quite incredible. Cerner is not only viable, but they're willing to concede that their ambulatory solution isn't all that. But at least they've invested along that front line. They're investing in it. They're talking about it. They're even publishing about challenges in that arena, which is great. I wish Allscripts would feel the same about Eclipse's Sunrise. The best thing Leidos has to offer that nobody can compete with is a knowledge of the current DoD HIT environment, how they dismantle the solution to enable connectivity will have to be spelled out in the transition plan. But I think with Accenture's help, they can pull it off with aplomb. An elite team with strong DoD ties and an understanding of the challenge that is theater medicine. Nobody can assert that acumen on this list. It's quite a challenge. The next one is Price Waterhouse. Now, this one's a bit harsh. I don't know why, but after I wrote it and thought about it and discussed it with those closest confidants, discovered that it sounds mean, but it's not. Okay, so let's hug Price Waterhouse close. Here we go. The good, bad, and ugly is that Price Waterhouse is teaming up with GDIT and offering DSS's commercial version of the Veterans Administrative Vista EHR. What can be said about a solution like Vista? Well, really not much. However, we cannot cast aspersions upon a system that has been the cheerleader for open systems. That's a good thing. But can you deny that each and every joint session on the Hill, where the DoD health representative and the VA health representative sat side by side, we all noticed how they were kicking each other underneath the table? VA has been stating annually, almost like a pilgrimage, that DoD should go with Vista. They said it would be fun, and also made promises that Vista works. And of course it has a captive audience, so therefore 100% adoption. We can also take a look at VA investments and their ongoing effort to modify and upgrade their technology foundation as a sign that overpaying and underperforming for older solutions isn't always practical for reinventing medicine and how it is practiced. Really, the best analogy I could come up with from a clinical informaticist perspective, the system is really an NCAA football Division III. No offense to University of Wisconsin Whitewater football, go Warhawks, but this is older technology, and they really haven't moved forward like they should have, especially with as well financed as they were. Maybe PwC did not read the Gartner report in 2011 entitled Vista Comparison to the Commercial Electronic Health Record Marketplace. That would be a stretch for a firm that prides themselves on research. Very smart people there. I've seen them. Therefore, let's assume DSS just did an incredible sales job. I believe the DSS conversation went something like this. Hello, PwC Federal Health experts. I'm from DSS. DSS Vista is a lot like Epic without the success. We've never dislodged Cerner, and yet here we are, face to face. Sort of like musical chairs. Everyone sat down, and who's left? Not much, eh? Can you deny that Vista's lack of features and functionality is an underdog story? And who did not shed a tear when watching Old Yeller? Therefore, I believe DSS did a heck of a job of selling this. They're using MedSphere, certainly, that has some talent in this specific arena, and I think that whoever the BD lead was that brought them into the PwC/GDIT deal should certainly get an all-expense trip to Maui. GDIT is a different kind of partner. They've had deep DoD qualifications, so much so that they almost pursued DHMSM with a real EHR partner in McKesson. Paragon has some challenges, but they have credibility, and that company has the deep pockets necessary to manage the requirements as they change and as they evolve. Someone had to say something nice about the largest EHR vendor not in the room, so I said it. One has to wonder if this is a good decision, but alas, strategy and tactics are not really my cup of tea. All right? I appreciate the symbolism of Vista, and even the way that people providing PR for the solution are almost cult-like in this mumps-based love affair. But I think this team will not see an award. So certainly the partners will have worked a lot for very little. Sorry about that. Now, the little engine that could, InterSystems, TrackCare, good, bad, and ugly. Nice user interface, folks. They've had growth overseas. In fact, they've made headway in the national health system in the UK. They, along with Cerner and iSoft. iSoft, by the way, is actually a hospital information system that's international that competes all the time against TrackCare, owned by CSC. Now, CSC hasn't done much to bring it to the U.S. for a wide variety of reasons. I've seen the reports and the gap analysis and so on, not to bring iSoft in, but it's interesting. But essentially, Cerner, iSoft, and TrackCare are taking the NHS northward, if you will. InterSystems grabbed months and saw through their puberty years. All right, they've evolved from InterSystems M to Cache to Ensemble. Their application integration is very cool. Ask Epic; they use InterSystems, as does the latest, greatest commercial versions of Vista. The relationship with Epic has been mutually beneficial and has allowed InterSystems to grow in parallel. Along with the sales numbers of their Track Health solution overseas, this company has actually been quite profitable. They do not have the DoD chops, however, though. They do not have, they've not sold their Track Health solution in the U.S., and this customer is different, to say the least. I do not see the solution as a legitimate contender. However, if you wanted to root for a David versus Goliath, I would say this is the team. I have seen the solution and was impressed. I had another statement here, but I'm going to go ahead and skip over that. I've gone a little bit over. I didn't mean to do that, but let me give one final thought before we jump to questions, if that's right, Laurie. And that is, you know, the top 3 U.S. revenue-generating EHR providers are in the game: Allscripts, Cerner, and Epic. These vendors are all viable and improvements tenfold compared to the solutions that are in place across the military health today. Each of these vendors offer competitive portfolios that can exceed the expectations of the military. And yet, we all know software is not what will make this a success. It will be the execution, the transition, the strategy, the delivery of training, and an understanding of the unique environment and the wonderful people of the U.S. military. Winning the folks should be in order. Okay? This is a historical opportunity to define what principles your firm believes in and what we really all want to deliver. This is about mitigating risks. It's about predictability. It's about history. And this is all about sustainability. I can say one thing that is undeniable. The United States military deserves a team that will be honorable, will not overpromise and underdeliver, but will wake each and every day trying to figure out better ways to improve the delivery of care, maintain quality, and ensure positive outcomes. A healthier military, after all, means a wealthier and healthier America. Thank you very much. I want to open this up.
Thanks, Dim Sum. Now we would like to open it up to the audience for questions. As a reminder, you can use the questions section on the GoToWebinar panel to submit them. And while we wait for questions, I just want to mention to everyone that we covered a lot of content today, but it really only scratched the surface. So if you're interested in hearing more from Dim Sum, send me a note and we just might be able to talk him into a follow-up. I'm not seeing any questions, and that's probably because you've covered it in so much detail.
All right.
Okay, I do have one. Do you expect the project to pay market rates for consultants?
No, I do not believe so. I believe that inevitably the project will come in very strict, very conservative, and looking at the grander scheme of things. That is, there are things that they don't know. Therefore, they're not going to come in and overpaying initially, because that's setting a bar, if you will. And one of the things that is consistent, that's positive working with the federal government, is that you won't suddenly get a different rate than someone else will. All right, so that's a positive thing. The negative is that sometimes people with more experience and so on cannot qualify their personnel to be paid a certain rate. So I would say that the rates are not going to be as high as they would be in the commercial environments, especially with University Health Consortium hospitals and the like, the most attractive of clients that we seek in the commercial realm.
Okay. What is your definition of small business in this sense?
And these are the folks that are small disabled veteran-owned small businesses, the veteran-owned businesses, minority-owned, women-owned, and the like. It's not making fun of them. It's categorizing them in a specific category with small business, and within federal, there is a category of what size your revenue is and the amount of folks that you have, and also if you're in a hub zone, where you're located, and what the value is of bringing you in, and not just checking a box, but what value your team brings in. One of the things we sort of poke fun of sometimes, and maybe inappropriately, is that when you're a small business, you're willing to say yes to everything. And then when the doors close, you're going, how are we going to do that, right? So as a small business, it's nicer for the folks to really be focused and say, I'm going to focus on medical device. I'm going to focus on security. I'm going to focus on this element of integration just within laboratory medical devices. Whatever it may be, but find that niche rather than saying I can do all things for all people. I hope that didn't go too far off topic.
How do you think these vendors plan to train end users with all the different locations and mobility of the end users?
You know, honestly, I believe that if I was solutioning for each of these vendors, you'd end up creating your own Epic University, your own Cerner University, your own Allscripts University that essentially certifies and credentials folks of the methodology process and methodology of how to communicate. You have your own call center that people can actually pick up the phone as an installer, project manager, and call up and say, hey, I've got a problem, I've got an issue, and how to handle that. Remember, you've got an entire crew of vetted personnel. All right, so if my best guy that I have out there that's doing Cerner work had a DUI 2 years ago, he's not going to get on a ship. Okay, he's not going to be vetted for certain things. Well, he's the perfect person to put in the university to teach and educate people on how to install laboratory, for example. I hope that wasn't too direct. It could have been Allscripts or Epic or anyone. But the point is that I believe they're going to have to do a consolidated, centralized enterprise education system and maintain the type of mentality that Epic has done, and that is that if you're certified and credentialed, you can touch Willow. If you've done this, you can touch Cadence. The same type of thing. And I think that's the mentality that's going to have to happen to really be successful and to be sustainable.
Okay. Do you think the small businesses should start conversations with all of the different primes or focus on one?
You know, the truth of the matter is that everyone would like to end up sharing the bets. You go to Las Vegas, you put one on red, one on black, one on even, one on odd. Guess what happens? You lose anyway, all right? It's better to go in and decide what teams make sense to you. You look at the applications that you know of, Cerner, Epic, Allscripts, and the like. Look at those teams, what their history is, and basically that's what you're gambling on. But it's much easier, and I think it's more appreciated, certainly, to come in and say, this is my background. But to be honest, I'm not going to say things are completely closed, but I would say the vast majority of partners have already been selected. Now, they will as they move and evolve. This is a 10-year project. It's not going to occur overnight, but they want to start with this A team. And then as they proceed beyond the RFP, when the award is done, certainly the gratuitous protest will occur. Then when the business starts up, then they're going to find areas that they're weak or areas that are not as solidified and stratified as like they thought they did. But remember this, the moment someone wins, folks, everyone's going to be on their heels. All right, they're like sycophants, essentially. So instead of going in right now with the attitude, let's just wait and see who wins and jump on board, no, make a bid. Make a gamble. Put forth the effort that's there. Small businesses, it's been rather expensive, by the way, to pursue this. It's taken quite a bit of time to actually get on the right teams, if you will, see how things fall out and so on. I mean, Lockheed, Siemens, and athenahealth was going to be a team. So think of all the teams that came on board with that group and said, here you go, this is what I'm going to do. GDIT almost went up with McKeston. There were people that were probably joining that team. And the same thing can be said of Northrop Grumman that had Meditech on their team for a period of time. There were partners there and went that direction. I would not go off and stretch myself thin and say I'm going to be all things for all people. It won't work. Next.
Okay. Do you think veterans will be favored in hiring and contracting?
I hope so. I expect so. We have a tremendous amount of respect for veterans. And on top of it, I think what's really impressive to me is to grab the veterans and have them with the mindset of saying, how do I bring in people that have unique backgrounds? theater medicine, folks. All right, where is all the talent in theater medicine? Where are the combat medics? Where are people that have actually been downrange? Where are people that actually understand inter and intra-theater? Where are people that actually understand that black hole that the moment a patient is actually put with high acuity, critical care patient onto an aircraft and then shipped off somewhere, and then when they land, all that information is then downloaded to that next site. That is where that talent needs to be, and certainly veteran-owned companies are going to be in that specific sphere. And if they're not, that's more than an embarrassment. That's not going to occur. Okay, not with the fine folks like Captain Wyndham leading this effort. They're going to do a great job. And by the way, kudos to that man. He's done an incredible job of guiding this, working with folks, and making everybody feel. The moment they walked out of his office, they all felt loved, appreciated, and respected. And that's fantastic. Good for all of us.
Are you willing to share the name of the company that was being referenced that could have delivered but didn't bid?
Oh, are we talking about for theater medicine? Let's go ahead and do it this way, Lori. Those folks that are interested from the top vendors, please, a specific representative, go ahead and email Lori, and I can go ahead and share a bit of information. This is not supposed to be a commercial thing. I didn't want to do that type of thing. I want to be appropriate, so let's go ahead and do it through that panel, and I'll just share it is one single company that does first responder, EMS, ambulance, paramedic type of things, and I think it'll be outstanding foundation. Very flexible, low com, no issue or challenge there at all.
Okay, what about the current COTS inpatient clinical system from CliniComp being called Accenture? Is that being replaced for sure?
You know, actually, I believe it is being replaced. Now, the issues and challenges they've had certainly have not been all their own, okay? Integration, interoperability starts from the very top. It basically says, you know, here's the mandate. Things have to share. Data has to be liquid. We have to share information so that we can actually move these visits across and the patient can evolve and get to homeostasis. So what I'm going to say is this. Today, a lot of things are being done with Accenture and CliniComp, CliniComp being the company, Accenture being the product, are rather manual, not a lot of clinical decision support. CDS is very, very primitive, not seeing a lot of outcomes-based medicine type of capabilities, and we're certainly not using cloud, Zincs, or the like clinical content that would really provide what really needs to be in that space. And with what I've seen, what I've been demonstrated, I did not see closed-loop medication there, right, which I think is very high risk. And the mission's not here to bash. It's to basically move forward. I can just say that I think CliniComp will have a real issue and challenge staying relevant, especially if you compare it side by side in capacity by any vendors that I've mentioned as far as the top three.
Okay, can you tell us what the best source is to uncover how many clinicians practice at military hospitals, clinics, and forward units is?
Believe it or not, the SPA War did a fantastic job of getting all the documentation together like that. Most all the companies that are in this bid certainly have those RFPs. The RFPs available to the average person. So go to a SPA War website, that's a military vehicle for acquisition procurement, and look for DHMSM, and whenever you find that, or you could go to GovWin, and a few other websites that you can download the materials. There's an Excel spreadsheet that tells you how many beds, what the specialties are, the number of personnel, a wide variety of things. So everything you possibly need and want. They did a really cool graph. I recall going to industry days and looked at that afterwards, and sure enough, had a headache afterwards. A lot of hospitals.
What's your opinion of the Leidos SAIC team incumbency and loss opportunity to evolve the MHS to a better state than to prompt it to request a new solution?
You know, first I haven't received a paycheck for many of these, so from my perspective, it's always a two-edged sword, all right? And that is that, I mentioned it, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. It's a positive thing. Leidos, SAIC have been planning for quite a period of time. The Max IT and Vitalize acquisitions were not done by accident, okay? That was strategy. It was positioning themselves to say, how do I do Epic or Cerner or McKesson or whatever those companies may have been in their thought process, and they said, we're going nuts. So that in and of itself is a shift and change. But I think the real shift and change was when they said, let's bring in Accenture. Accenture has so much credibility in this space. They really do. And what they did with the HIX is rather incredible. It was a political football, folks. And when was the last time now? Yes, people talk about Obamacare and ACA. I don't want to go there by all means. But as far as fixing the problem and issue at hand, CGI essentially was given Accenture to come in and fix and resolve it. They fixed it. And when someone fixes something, that adds credibility. With regards to being an incumbent, there is a significant percentage of folks that win deals because they're the incumbent, because they have that aspect of history. All right? But I truly believe the value of Leidos in this specific scenario, in this specific environment, is that they know the DoD HIT. They know how messed up some of those systems are. They know they're not using ontology. They know that they were supposed to use structured data, and it's unstructured. And so that is exactly the type of folks that you need to speak with. No matter who wins, trust me, someone's going to pick up the phone and calling Leidos to say, how the hell did you make that? Why'd you do it that way? So they're going to be involved. So is Northrop Grumman, whether they want to or not. It's part of the overall effect of having an as-is environment to be. And it's not overnight. It's going to be at least 7 years to be able to get this thing rolled out. Go ahead.
Can the Department of Defense choose an integrator like CSC and also a vendor like Epic and pull them apart?
You know, it's funny. Early on when I was coming over from the commercial world into the federal space, I asked the same thing. What can I do the best of? You know what I mean? I like these guys, I like that, I like this. No, it's a holistic, it's a team approach. Okay, and that is that once you decided to get specific components of the human anatomy, I don't need 2 livers, I don't need 6 lungs, I don't need 4 hearts. This is what I need. And we all agree that any degree of success has to have an appropriate hierarchy of management, program management, and certainly a degree of high acumen. What's happened historically in healthcare IT, in the federal space, they have not had higher acumen in the HIT, clinical, financial, operational category, but they had extensive work in program management. In this specific type of environment, the DoD is not going to go in and say, I like these guys, I want you to grab that and grab this. Early on, those people had to find their team, they had to find their solutions, and then put it together. Solutioning basically is building a cake. All right? You can't suddenly grab a piece of the cake from all over the place, but any time but before that actually is dropped. When that RFP is dropped, that cake should have already been made. And they should be in positions to basically explain and justify all those components of their cake. You just can't mix and match later on.
If Kaiser's Epic modernization costs $6.5 billion, why should the DoD cost $11 billion? Is it the theater use case that will cost so much more?
The truth of the matter is that if you look at migration conversion from any side, I mean, go to Baptist out in Oklahoma, go to Duke, go to Crawford Long and Emory University down there in Atlanta. There are migration conversion issues with older products or legacy products and so on. Remember Y2K, folks. We went out to a site, and the CEO and CIO and CFO said, hello, welcome. You're going to do our Y2K. We've got 18 systems. By the time we were done, they had 74 systems, all right? It took a lot of work, and that was just counting and auditing. Now imagine the work that will take place over a 7-year time period to not only educate, train, and transition, but move this data from irrelevance to relevance, looking at registries and making those applicable. That, I think, is going to be the fascinating end result, I think, of having this done the way it is. The expense goes up, folks, because it's not a regional thing. It's one thing when we descend upon Dallas, Texas as Allscripts or NextGen or eClinicalWorks installers doing a large multiple ambulatory care center or an IDN that is associated with a medical hospital or something, not medical hospital, a medical school. Basically, this is going in and finding all these different solutions that are all disparate, all proprietary, trying to bring it into the fold, all right, without overuse of buses, most certainly, all right, but bringing it to the fold and then sharing that data so it actually becomes applicable and helpful. Because you can't suddenly denigrate all the other hospital systems because I'm adding a new one. All right, so they have to be maintained. That aspect of parallel equilibrium is going to be a challenge, most certainly. And yes, the cost will be high because you have to go through a vetting process as well as understanding the security involved with FISMA, MILRAMP, MEDRAMP. The MILRAMP and MEDRAMP are elements of how you store the data, organize it in data centers, all right? And what you do to share information, there's cybersecurity, there's an expense to that. There really is. Even with the same product, it's going to be more expensive through the federal government, the processes that they have currently in place and regulatory compliance rules.
I just want to let you know we've received tons of questions that have really been statements thanking you for all of the detail and all of the information, and I'll forward those along to you so you can see them. The last question I've received multiple times is if you had to pick just one team to win, who would you bet on?
One team to win? That's easy. The United States military. They're the ones that are going to win, all right? Because whoever wins the award, you're going to be shamed into making sure that this does not fall apart. And the people that are going to be working each and every day are going to end up having, the single desire to make sure and prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the commercial realm has been working very long and hard, mitigating risk, ameliorating the risk, working hard to come up with creative applications, and knowing very well that the very government that's providing us new rules for meaningful use to accountable care organizations and other types of things, those are the same folks that basically are going to be paying for this. And the one entity that all of us can agree we don't have problems and issues and challenges with is making sure that the service members are treated right. That's who the winner's going to be. I wish I could choose one, but the truth is, let's keep this ongoing discussion. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And certainly hope I didn't offend anyone. This is supposed to be fun. This is enjoyable, and it's an honor to be here. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone that attended today. I think it was a very informative and fun discussion, and hopefully we'll have another follow-up in the future. If anyone has questions they would like to address directly, you can email me at lorre@histalk.com, and I'll make sure DHMSM receives those questions and responds to you. Attendees, watch your email for a link to the recording, and we look forward to seeing you at our next HIS Talk webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day.